treated by the music industry is how black folks have been treated by the power structure. It's like, you're a bastard child. We don't want you. You're not good enough to be part of us. How dare them say that? So over the next 10, 15, 20 years, I would like to see GoGo reach its rightful position of prominence.
I'm not only about preserving go-go music. I want to spread it because I find that it's such a very powerful expression of African culture here, that out of the chaos that is DC can come this intense, stark, powerful, beautiful music. And I think that people have to know about it.
Came from Southeast Washington, to the best of my knowledge, and it was cultivated in the streets where kids get together for some form of entertainment and entertaining themselves. They get together and beat on buckets and cans or whatever and make sound. And those kids that was in school that had band instruments, they'd use their band instruments and play those instruments also at the same time. And that's how they put a band together, and they made up lyrics to talk about and enjoy the times that were going on, whatever's going on at the time, to make up songs about that.
Go-go. Polyrhythmic.
It's live. A lot of movement.
To me, go-go music is an inner city groove that was started here in Washington. And to my best ability to understand it, it's just the inner city funk.
It's a little bit of pop, rock, mostly African beat to it with the congos and all. That's my perspective. That's what I think it is. Mostly pop, rock, and African all combined into one.
Go-go is kind of like the original beat from Africa, really. Cause got that, the beat of the drum, it really is the beat of the heart.
Well, I was attracted from across the street just by the rhythms of it. It sounded real good. And then when I saw what they were playing, then that's why I really came over.
Did the rhythms remind you of any other kind of music?
African person.
Coming from Africa.
Hey, go-go is African music, really, That's where it comes from.
See this? Africa. That's where it all started. Africa.
Kange, be strong. Kange, be strong. Kange, be strong. And get on the rhythm, the swing over stockpiles of decadence, the swing over oceans of indecision and callousness. Go in the piles of fractured skulls of death and swing out. Go in the sub-existence and remake your music. Time, go, 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 children. Remake time, go, 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 children. Hold your bells like hearts and make it go, 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 go. Reign in the go-go glory that is our creation.
I think I must have come to D.C. about 2.5 years ago, and that was the first time that I heard go-go music. I was walking somewhere downtown, and I just stopped in my tracks when I heard it. It was a very arresting sound, and I just stopped and asked later on somebody, well, who are these people that play on these paint cans? I mean, I was just fascinated by it. It really, it cut right through me. I think it was the strength of the rhythm, and it reminded me of Africa, it reminded me of the Caribbean, and it was one of really the strongest elements of African presence that I felt in Washington, D.C. when I first came here. It was like a connection to something elsewhere.
I was working with an area colleague and looking into go-go and documenting it as an indigenous art form of Washington, D.C. And we were having a difference of opinion as to whether Africanisms actually existed in go-go music or not. So it was my mission to try to prove to him with a preponderance of evidence that yes, indeed, there were African influences in go-go, even if the band members had not actually traveled to the continent of Africa to study music. Well, the percussions up front, the use of the hand percussions, as opposed in addition to the trap drum set, which is sort of standard to all kinds of music in America, popular contemporary music in America. But the use of the hand percussion, cowbells, kunga drums and the like, rototoms being a contemporary manifestation of tom-toms. And the call and response between the audience and the band. Or sometimes you might have call and response between certain factions of the band, between the voice and the horns, or between the voice and the percussions. So that call and response element, which you can see, say, in black church music, and taking it even further back into African music, is a very prominent, a very African characteristic.
One of the things in calling out certain entities or spiritual forces, or the head would call, and the response, because it's a feedback mechanism, meaning in Africa it was not about a spectator kind of situation, that everything was interrelated and interconnected. So in order to make sure that the rhythm and make sure the information was put out, the audience or the people will give you a response to allow you to know that everything was all right. We still find that in the church, the black church, where the preacher says something and the preacher will say, "I don't hear y'all. Do y'all hear me?" And everybody say, "Amen." And he said, "Yeah, okay." And the same thing with James Brown. You know, he may be singing a song, and he said, "Hit me. Does everybody understand what I'm saying?" They say, "Yeah." You know what I'm talking about? "Yeah." And it's the same thing with the preacher today, the black preacher that does the same kind of thing. So you find that was always a feedback mechanism to harmonize one another, so we know that we was on the one.
polyrhythmic sound that has a unique African. I mean, I've heard African bands, I've heard Caribbean bands, which also have a similar rhythmic attitude to go-go. I mean, if you listen to a lot of African music, you will hear go-go beats, and certain, especially stuff from. So I would say stuff from Nigeria. If you ever listen to Fela Ransom Kuti, who's the dominant musician out of that part of Africa. A lot of his stuff sounds like go-go, even before we had go-go, even his use of horns, because it's very much a horn-based driven sound with African percussion. Fela was doing the same or a similar sound in the 70s when he because he was very influenced by like John Coltrane and James Brown, and he mixed the two together. And in some ways, a similar analogy can be made about go-go music.
How important it's almighty, you know. The drum and the percussion, you know. I mean, that's it. It's almighty. It's like building a house. You cannot build a house on shaky ground, on like mud, you know. You have to have a rock solid foundation, you know. If you don't have that, you can't even think about playing go-go music.
That's what's keeping it pace, the groove. Everybody, you know, getting into it with the congos, the drums. That's mainly what it is. That's what you're gonna mainly hear in the go-go. Anyway, it's the drums, congos, that's it. That's all you're gonna hear.
The backbone of the music itself is percussion. All right. The electricity could go out at a go-go, and the funk will be maintained because we have the congos, you have the drums, you have the cowbell, and they all sync. Some groups even use what we call rototoms, you know, to accent the percussion. So that's the base. I mean, you're not going to have a go-go group unless you have the percussion.
We as black people are very rhythmic, so the drum, not only is a sound, it's a feel. You hit the drum and you feel that drum go through your whole body. If I hit the bass drum, it make you respond. So it's an inward thing. So the basis of go-go being the drum, I mean, that's the first thing you respond to. You go with the beat. You go with the movement of the atmosphere. It's a whole atmosphere. I mean, you can't have go-go with weak drums.
Particular society, rhythm patterns, we don't come out necessarily with a name of the pattern. And traditionally, you knew the name because in understanding the African rhythms, it was polyrhythmic. And all drums were saying different things, but they had to be in sync with one another. So one of the patterns, I think, would go. Now that's like an offshoot of one of the rhythms they call wan wan ko. So the wan wan ko is go. Wan wan ko. Wan wan. noticing that the youth are very creative with the hands thing. See, I mean, they sink in the body and move in the hands, playing the different rhythms, you know, and it's all again, like you say, that African expression. Every aspect of Africans, the drum and the music is a part of acknowledging their celebrations. From the time that a child is born, where we have naming ceremonies, we have ceremonies dealing with the acknowledgement of a new soul coming to life, from periods of marriage, when people are married, getting married, that the drum is there. Youth are going through the rites of passage, this drum is there. When somebody is passing to the next world or to another phase of life, the drum is there. So looking just at, first of all, the importance of the drum being a central aspect of the music was always there. So you find today, particularly in West Africa, as a matter of fact, in Ghana, there's a bell called the GoGo bell, A-G-O-A-G-O. And one of the things about the GoGo bell was used to bring on certain spiritual forces during different celebrations, that one would play the GoGo bell to aid in bringing the ancestors into certain celebrations and to acknowledgement.
I was listening to some old records. You know, if you listen to some old stuff, sometimes you be saying there, really, that's go-go without congas or a guy just rapping in between, making it more happening. You know, like if you listen to some of the old barcades like Roy Ayers, Roy Ayers, like I listened to the song Life Is Just a Moment. You know what I mean? Yeah. You know, boom, boom, boom. You know, really, it was in that slow groove, you know. And then if you go way back too now, to the James Brown.
I was getting ready to hit that one.
Yeah, go back to the Little Richard days, where you know those guys were doing call and response as well.
James Brown, he had a tremendous impact. The instrumentation of his group, the horns, as well as the rhythm sections. You know, James Brown used to travel. He used to have two drummers, you know, see the style, you know, of playing a show straight through without stopping. James Brown would bridge into his music. The go-go does exactly the same thing, bridging into the music without stopping a lot of times. And he'd be working so hard, man. He'd have one drummer go until he could go, you know, and then another drummer pick up. And then he also had the other percussionists on the conga drums, which is the same thing that the go-go has. The horn sections, the spot parts with the horns. Ba-da-da, 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 ba, ba-da-dun-dun-dun-dun, ba-da-bum-bum-bum. James.
You to Washington, Richmond, Baltimore, and in this song he did called Night Train.
Rap, you see nothing but turntables, you know, and a DJ. This is hard. Most kids have never actually seen a live band, you know, so like when they were in Pittsburgh and I went, the people there were so fascinated because kids had never really seen, you know, a live band with the drums and the sax and that type of thing. So that seems to, you know, bring it out even more.
You can go to concerts right now, today, and see 5 or 6 rap acts, and I see one drum, one guitar, not one musician. I mean, what are we doing, you know? So I think the go-go music can actually save live music.
started from D.C. It started in D.C.
It came from Southeast Washington.
First of all, everybody get the notions, they thought EU was from New York. EU's from D.C., okay? Let me make the record straight now. EU's from D.C. GoGo started in D.C. with Chuck Brown, okay? Chuck Brown is the godfather of soul and go-go.
Why is Chuck Brown the godfather?
He the one started it all up.
Hello, the policeman is on the premises, yo. What is he doing in here? The policeman is on the premises. What is he doing in here? The policeman is on these premises. What is he doing in here? Policeman on these premises. What is he doing? Hey! Mo and Johan can restore, making a fortune behind the door.
What's the #1 go-go band of all time?
Chuck Brown and the Soul Searchers. I could tell you Chuck Brown and the Soul Searchers. Why? Because they originated go-go music. I feel they are like the godfather of go-go. Chuck Brown.
Chuck Brown. Because you can't find nobody that's in it with the age of Chuck Brown jumping around like he's doing now.
Chuck is most definitely the godfather, the founder, the pioneer, or whatever other words you can choose. He is the man.
Well, there are probably many theories on this. I think Chuck Brown being the godfather of go-go, he used to play what we used to call the beat. And that beat is prevalent throughout go-go music today. And the beat that he played years ago in the early 70s, 1970, 1971, was a beat that people would have to dance to. Another thing that he did is between his songs, the drum would do a roll and the music would continue. So a Chuck Brown set was free of any kind of breaks, unless he took a break down to do a ballad or something. But when Chuck played, you danced literally all night.
Back in the day, when Chuck was playing like a lot of R&B and jazz tunes and things like that, a lot of other bands they would play a song and they'd stop, you know, whereas Chuck Brown would just kind of keep grooving, you know, and he would fill in the spaces with little dedications and things like that, and his rhythm was so funky, you know, and I think that's definitely how go-go music started.
And speaking about that, in particular Chuck Brown and some of the other groups like Young Senators, Black Heat, the Aggressions, other groups, in particular in D.C., one of the things that's interesting, I was reading an article about Chuck Brown, and I was reading in that article he spoke about that he used to play with a group called the Los Latinos. And in playing with that group, he said the percussion influenced him very much in that group. And they used to break. They used to play the music, then they used to break and let the percussion play, etc. And I'm quite sure that probably was, you know, he's probably playing salsa or some of the other music, yeah, that was, you know, African-influenced music. And to tie that into some of the people who influenced Chuck Brown, like James Brown, who used to always talk about give the drummer some. Now, you hadn't did anything yet until you gave the drummer some. Now, it's interesting that we used to say give the drummer some in America, but we didn't have to say that in Africa because the drum was a central element. But being that when we've taken on different European instruments, and that the drum was no longer the highlight, and you had a lot of different instruments coming into play, the horns, the bass, the guitars, etc. So the drum was no longer the central element, but we always showed you as African people tied in the drum. When they say, give the drummer some, and once you gave the drummer some, it was turned out.
As far as back I can go is during the Anacostia Park days, you know, back when they used to have the Battle of the Band and all that good stuff back there, when basically all groups sounded different. It was Aggressions, Brute, you know, you can just name all the groups there, you know, 100 Years Time, Phase Destiny, you know, Black Heat.
You had groups like The Father's Children, you had groups like Black Heat, Scacey and the Sound Service.
You had the ambassadors that were with the recreation department that have been a very important part of the go-go movement. But at that time, you had a couple of things that started to happen. You had a couple of groups that separated themselves off in terms of the professionalism. That was the Young Senators and Chuck Brown and the Soul Searchers. The Young Senators at that time contained Leroy Fleming, who is now with Chuck Brown and the Soul Searchers and plays the saxophone.
As a matter of fact, when you think of the dominant players that really that really set the mold for go-go playing when it comes to guitar playing, drummers, you know, you can basically, you know, you can just get the good musicians from Chuck. You know what I mean? You know, as far as, you know, like one of my idols was Big Leroy, Chuck Brown and Soul Searcher. You know, who basically my style is, you know, I guess more or less the young Leroy, except for, you know, one day I get the title from him.
He created the sound that, you know, that's called go-go, you know, because, I mean,